I've fought for my country, I've served, I've built, and I'll go from the hills to the hollows, from the cities to the suburbs, to the loneliest town on the quietest street, to take our message of hope and growth for every American, to every American, for a better America, for an endless, enduring dream and 1,000 points of light.
This is the What and the Why podcast for the week ending, the 2nd of December, 2018.
Greetings, welcome to the What and the Why podcast, in which we talk Turkey and we speak Latin. Putin and MBS speak the new and yet the ancient language of the strongman. The French are still revolting, and baby, it's cold outside. Ooh, sexist. I'm Tim Marshall, and this is
David Waywell.
Right on cue, David. Thank you very much. I'm told by people younger than myself, which is most people, that at this point, all the best podcasts ask each other what they did this week. I can't say I'm that interested. However, give me the highlight of your week, David.
I massacred a load of mice.
Oh, aye.
Yeah, I finally rid of them all. I've been plagued by them for about 2 months.
So do bear with us before we get on to geopolitics. But yeah, there has been. You also didn't get my joke on Twitter. You said you'd seen one of your mouse on the stairs. I said where?
Oh, I did get it, and then I proceeded to look up
the
the damn song on the internet, and I was stuck singing it for about a day.
Okay. So again, for those of you who are not following what has been a pretty terrible saga, David had a mouse, which turned out to be 7 mice. Yeah. And you tried my advice for the mice, which was the humane trap and some peanut butter. That went no.
I spent 5 weeks trying to catch them humanely.
And you are now known as the mouse murderer of the Northwest.
Yeah, and I got rid of them in 2 days using proper traps. Proper traps and peanut butter.
And do you feel bad about that?
I do feel a bit bad about it, but at least I'm sleeping.
Yeah. Get a cat. Are you going to ask me what my highlight was?
Is it going to involve Leeds United?
I was at Sheffield. We won 1-0 with a goal 8 minutes from time, which is always fun. And moving on. So, if I said to you the phrase "the greatest generation," do you know what it refers to?
Well, World War II, I'd imagine.
Yeah. There was a book by one of the great anchors of post-war America television. I think it was Ted Koppel, and I'm sorry if it wasn't. And he had this book called The Greatest Generation, meaning that the people that went through that and then went on, a lot of them into public service, were the greatest ever American generation. I mean, you can argue about it, but it was quite an influential book about 10, 12 years ago, which of course brings us to George H.W. Bush. He died late Friday, age 94, and immediately a massive amount of tributes are paid to him, and I'm happy to go down that road. But there's 2 other ways of looking at it. One is there are negative things to say. You can argue you shouldn't say them. It comes from the old Latin, de mortuis nil nisi bonum, speak nothing but good of the dead. I don't actually agree with that, do you?
Oh, it's a tough one. Yeah, I mean, yes, I do agree with it within a certain context. You know, the first few days, possibly, especially for people in public life. I wouldn't want Trump to be doing his usual thing of, you know, mixing praise with his insulting tweets. So I'm glad he's not done that so far. But Bush is a deeply divisive figure, though.
What, the father?
Yeah, he is, because in a sense, first of all, you've got to view him from the point of view we are actually looking at him in a way through the prism of Trumpism. So at the moment,
well, yes, and in that prism, it's entirely positive, surely.
It is almost entirely positive. He was a one-term president. He's praised with things which he probably didn't really have. I mean, he's often praised as the person who saw the end of the Cold War, which he did do a lot of things to help, you know, bring that about.
In those crucial years, he was a steady hand on the tiller with a brilliant team around him, like James Baker, then Secretary of State, and he saw it through. All right, I'm going to ambush you because you're going to say some negative things, and first I'm going to tell you some things which you may already know. I don't know. This guy enlisted on his 18th birthday to fight the Nazis. Well, the Japanese. He flew 58 combat missions. He was shot down. He became a congressman. He was ambassador to the UN. He was the envoy to China, director of the CIA, vice president, president. He signed the Disabilities Act, which was a real breakthrough act for rights. He launched the modern volunteer service movement. As a younger man, he started, you can tell how long ago this was, the United Negro College Fund at Yale. I mean, he was a privileged guy at Yale, but he started this for people less fortunate than himself. He launched the YMCA in Texas. He coached an inner city baseball team. His daughter Robin died when she was just 3, and he started a leukemia research foundation. He raised hundreds of millions of dollars for cancer research. I could probably go on. Even in the age of 90, he shaved his head in solidarity with a 2-year-old leukemia patient. What bad are you going to say about this man?
What I would say is, first of all, you view him through the lens of Trumpism, which in a sense holds him up to be a great president compared to Trump. However, in some circles, he is seen as representing that style of American politics, which is about the elite, the landed, the money. He is the father of a next American president, and if things had gone how people expected them to go, he would have been the father of another American president, President Jeb. So he represents a certain style of American politics, which is at the moment at the forefront of like the political debate, which is it's the swamp. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that, but amongst certain people on the right and the left, he is associated. I mean, his friendship with the Clintons is often, the Bushes and the Clintons are very close. Now, I don't necessarily agree with all that. All I'm saying is there is an audience out there who are critical of him. I mean, he famously said something about, "I'm never going to criticize American actions," and it's often associated wrongly with the shooting down of the Iranian jet in, I think it was in 1988. So there is a kind of nuanced argument to have about him, and like I say, I don't agree with a lot of it because I agree with you. Looking at his record, amazing achievements. However, again, director of the CIA around the time of Iran-Contra.
Well, yeah, and then as president, actually, he went on to pardon many people involved in Iran-Contra, which, again, for younger viewers, was a huge scandal, which they bypassed the legal norms of American foreign policy. Okay, and again, I assembled some evidence for those people who, can only see things through one lens. You might, I'm a couple of years older than you. Dukakis, remember Dukakis, presidential candidate? Yeah, 88. He was the worst Democratic presidential candidate I thought I would see in my lifetime, except for Walter Mondale and John, recent guy. John
Kerry.
Thank you very much. Phew. So when he was standing against Dukakis, he came out with what was called the Willie Horton ad. So an African American who'd been released on furlough, as they say, from prison, and whilst on furlough, he raped a woman. Bush got all over it and put it out as a big attack ad, and it was seen as dog whistle. The no new taxes is well known. He didn't really stop Saddam Hussein from invading Kuwait because he sent the wrong signals, but then, of course, had to kick him out of Kuwait, and tens of thousands at least of Iraqis died. He then left Saddam in power. Pretty weak response to Tiananmen Square, 1989 in China. So, yeah, all those go against him, but I don't think you could possibly be an American president without having 2 lists like that.
No, I think that's true.
Except for the current American president, who's only pretty much got 1 list, and I'm sorry to be so prejudiced against him.
No, I agree. I'm just reading a book by Steve Kanaki. I think it's called The Red and the Blue, and it's talking about the campaign, the Bush-Clinton campaign, and one of the key things in it is the fact that Bush dallied with Pat Buchanan, his kind of nativism, who was the real precursor to like a modern American Trumpism. So you can go back and you kind of read the Bush presidency through the prism of now, and it's quite fascinating. And like I say, he did many great things, including, I would add, laying the foundations for what Clinton's great success, which was erasing the deficit. I mean, it was really the economy was coming around back around at the end of that campaign, but it was too late for Bush, and Clinton kind of reaped the rewards.
Yeah, and Clinton really rode that wave, didn't he? Rode the zeitgeist of the time. Quite moving at the end, and we are all mere mortals, including former presidents. His wife Barbara had already gone earlier this year, and apparently James Baker, his former Secretary of State, was by his bedside with members of the family, and he had Parkinson's and he'd been in and out of consciousness. And apparently he said, "Look, when he was awake, I just don't want to go back to hospital. I'm ready to go, and I want to see Barbara. I want to see Robin, the 3-year-old that died so long ago." Final words, apparently, were to President 41, his son, George W. He said, "You've been a wonderful father." And the president said, "I love you too," and apparently died a couple of minutes later. So, again, that's family stuff that many people have. Do you agree he should now have this incredible national state funeral, which is or ceremony, which is going to take place the coming week?
I think they have to, but this again is the problem with the American presidency. I mean, we often mock our own system here, but at least we have a constitution where we can separate the nasty business of politics from our head of state. The problem with America is you can't really do that. So he is the head of the state. So
yeah, the only state funeral I think we've had for a prime minister was for Churchill, mid-60s. Did Thatcher? Oh, I don't think she had a state.
She didn't. I think that would have been hugely divisive. I mean, up here in the northwest, it would have been
Indeed.
Yeah. I mean, at the time of Thatcher's death, wasn't the number one hit "Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead," which the BBC had to prevent being, or somebody stopped it being on the number one, or they didn't play it on the charts on the Sunday, because people had voted it, but they realised it had political overtones.
Well, yes. So, take you back to that Latin phrase. I mean, maybe they're going too far in the other direction. Well, again, just for detail, because it's going to be across the television across the week. Wednesday is a day of national mourning in the States. There's a ceremony at U.S. Capitol Hill. Bush will lie in state in the rotunda. The public can pay their respects, and I suspect there will be thousands of people going. There's then a memorial service at the National Cathedral. He's then transferred, the body's transferred to Houston, because that's where the family are from. And then he'll be laid to rest at the George H.W. Bush Presidential Library in Texas. And going back to The Greatest Generation, we shall not see his like again. Which brings us to Donald Trump. But it does, doesn't it?
Because it does, and I think we will see his like again, sadly.
Yeah, well, moving on from character and onto policy, the biggest news out of the G20 was that the US and China said, OK, we will negotiate for another 90 days over trade, a whole range of trade issues. And the reason this is positive is that if they hadn't agreed, and this is basically China blinking, Trump was going to raise the tariff on billions and billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods from 10% to 25%. From January the 1st, the Chinese would have responded. And that at that point, we probably could have said we are in a trade war, which could be a global trade war. At the moment, it's still at the sparring phase. So I actually think that's very positive. I think it was the most important thing to come out of the G20. The G20 itself isn't that important. It's often the bilaterals and what happens there that is more both important and interesting.
You want to take my take on it? My take is that I think China have done what China's been doing for the last 2 years, which is having a 100-year plan and realising that they can keep kicking the can down the road like they did with North Korea. It seems to me another. I mean, I just noticed on Twitter he's claiming it's one of the greatest trade deals, it's a great achievement and all this, and I don't think there's actually anything been agreed, has there? It's just we're going to discuss it for another 90 days, which seems to me the Chinese approach to a lot of things at the moment.
Yeah, they are pretty good at the long game, always have been. But I do think they've slightly blinked, and I think they think that he means what he says and he will do it. And every way you look at the economics, as far as I'm concerned, and everyone I read and admire, although both sides would lose, the Chinese would lose much, much worse. And also America and Trump do have a genuine point. I'll give you an example.
That was the one thing when you can always make two lists about American presidents, the pros and the cons. One area where I think Trump might be strong on is actually on this issue of China, because I remember from almost being a child that the big issue was, why is everything made in China? Why is the jobs moving to China?
It was Japan when I was a child, but yeah.
Yeah, China, Japan, Thailand, you know, all these, the Far East. So I kind of think that this is one of the few areas where Trump might actually be holding, it might be significant.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example. General Motors sells more cars in China than it sells in America. General Motors has factories in China, but it is not allowed to control them. Foreign companies can be minor shareholders, but not majority shareholders, even if it's their own company. They have to do it as a joint venture, because that gives the Chinese both control at the financial and also at the political level. Whereas if you want to go and open up a business in America and you want to be majority Chinese owned, you can be. So there is an imbalance there. There are many examples like that. And there's other examples in the trade that China sells far more to America than it buys from America. And so, the American leader can say to the Chinese, well, we've got to have parity, otherwise I'm going to put the taxes up. This is not a sort of character issue when it comes to the current American president.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Okay. Well, moving on, because Mr. T gets a lot of stuff, and in fact, I'm going to mention him again. Did you see Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia high five Putin?
Yes, and there's a great sketch on this week's Saturday Night Live of them doing it to excess. It's wonderful.
The comedy moment is these two leaders high-fiving each other. Also, I don't know if you noticed, in the background, they do it exactly as Trump walks into the room.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
No.
Next time you have a look at it, look between them, and you'll see Trump just walking through the door about 15, 20 yards away, and he catches this. And he often has a face like thunder. It's certainly a face like thunder at the time. Well worth looking at. But on the more serious note, I said at the start about the era of the strongman and the language, the ancient and new language of the strongman. It's clear neither of them care. You know the background. The background being Putin's just confiscated 3 Ukrainian boats and opened fire on the Ukrainian Navy. Mohammed bin Salman has or has not, depending on who you believe, overseen the murder of a journalist in Turkey. They know the world's cameras are on them. And what do? They high-five each other, hug, and smile.
Yeah, and I was going to say there's another layer to it again, though, which takes us back to what we were talking about last week, where there's this relationship, the growing relationship between Saudi Arabia and Russia, and at the same time, America's got a precarious situation, because how do you take a moral stance when you don't want the sort of geopolitics of the Middle East to change so dramatically?
Yeah, well, we talked about this last week in the context of Macron of France, who tries to have a policy of raising taxes on fuel because it's a green policy. And then, of course, realpolitik means he may start climbing down. And you have to be a hypocrite. But you don't have to basically stick 2 fingers up, or if you're American, flip the bird to the democratic world by hugging an open. It means they don't care.
Yeah, but again, to link it back to Bush, this is the thing that Bush did with Tiananmen Square, didn't he? I mean, he didn't. I was reading something today about how he had quiet diplomacy in the background. He wrote a personal message to the leader of China at the time, but it wasn't as overt as maybe a lot of people would have hoped.
Yes, and that was realpolitik. But I just think this goes beyond that into sticking 2 fingers up at everybody. I mean, to high-five each other in the current context. I mean, Mrs. May has been criticised simply for sitting down with him, and she says, British Prime Minister, that all they did was talk the Khashoggi murder affair. She didn't talk trade. Now, I don't know if it's true or not, but again, goes back to what I was saying last week about there can be a case to argue for hypocrisy in international relations. Surely it's better at least to try to have some decorum rather than high-fiving each other, saying, well, yo Blair.
Well, yeah, I agree. I mean, then again, it all stems from Putin, and I'm not sure, I've written about this a few times over the last few years, where Putin is effectively using democracy and our freedoms of speech and our right to protest and all these things against us. And I don't quite know what the answer to this sort of populism and hard man rhetoric is going to be, because I can't see how like the centre reasserts itself like the moral centre.
Yeah, well, it's got some way to run yet. There were two comedy moments, I thought. Well, probably several, but two that caught my eye. One, Trudeau of Canada was standing on the podium next to actually it was three now, yes, next to President Trump, and he called him Donald in his speech, and he said, as Donald knows, and Trump hates being called Donald, apparently. It's Mr. President to you.
Or President T, apparently, from his recent tweets.
Yeah, but not Donald. And his face was, again, absolutely like thunder. And the other one, I don't believe was deliberate. President Macron escapes the Gilets jaunes, the yellow vests protests in Paris, to get off to the G20 and bestride the world like a colossus. The first person he sees when he gets off the plane on the steps is a man in a high-vis yellow jacket. You can see him do this double take. Are they having a laugh? It was just, one of the airport security people.
Well, I was going to say, but to be fair, these days you can't really go far without seeing a man in a. But the third comedy bit was, have you seen him walk off the stage when he was greeting Trump, the Argentinian president?
I was just coming to that. Yeah, again, when I used to work in radio, I hated the phrase, "Oh, that'll make good radio," said sarcastically because we were talking about something that was an image. I always thought that the best images on radio were the pictures you could draw with words. But I'm not being able to do it for this. But yeah, Trump, the Argentine president is on the stage, massive stage. Trump walks up to him, shakes him warmly by the hand, and walks off. At which point, David.
Oh, an aide chases him. Is it the president of Argentina?
Yes.
Yeah, he looks completely baffled and almost looks like he wants to slap his forehead.
Because he stood there in the middle like
he was waiting
Johnny No Mates.
Waiting for his photo taken with Trump. And clearly Trump, at that stage, had gone past the point where he could or ever would admit he'd made a mistake. And all you hear on the audio is, "Get me out of here." Yes.
Get me out of here. I'm a president. Get me out of here.
I don't go back, yeah.
No, it was a comedy moment. It's up there almost with George Bush, the younger. I think it was in Japan when he strode off the stage manfully and yanked open the door, except the door was locked.
Yeah,
and he had to walk right across the stage and go out the door on the other side.
But actually, it does speak to something else about Trump. I mean, this week we had the Michael Cohen revelations where we suddenly discover that Trump was doing dealings with the Russians over the Trump Tower Russia project. But he couldn't really admit he was in the wrong or he'd lied. It was merely a case of, well, there's nothing wrong with me doing that,
Yeah, next he'll be using the phrase I misspoke. Thank you for bringing up Cohen, because you interviewed Rob Goldstone, didn't you?
I did this time last week, yeah.
And Goldstone is the chap who wrote the email partly introducing the Trump Foundation and Trump to the Russia political elite, and which led to the allegations of Russiagate. There is a podcast in full of that, and fascinating it is too.
It's worth listening to in full because my attitude was just to let Rob talk, and he tells a fascinating story. And if you're at all interested in Russiagate, it's good just to hear a slightly different view of things from what you tend to read, which is a little bit lacking in nuance.
Ivanka was going to Russia for, I don't know what, but for something. And Emin and I were having dinner with Don Jr. It was one of my 3 occasions I met him. And he said, said to Emin, are you around on the whatever day it is? Because Ivanka's going to be in Russia. And Emin said, well, yeah, sure. And even if I'm not, I'd make sure I was. I'd love her to see the crocus development. And they arranged for her to come. I believe she was there for either 40 minutes or 45 minutes. But it wasn't an Emin-driven visit. It was she was in that part of the world and in Moscow doing whatever she was doing. I don't know if it was a jewelry or fashion or something she was doing. And came there. I wasn't there, but went there, and he showed around Crocus, and I said, very nice, thank you very much, and took a picture and left. So it was, the reason that was never highlighted by us was it was never a Crocus or an Emin trip. It was like saying, oh, I'm going to be in Manchester. Why don't, now we've done this, why don't I just come and say hello to you for 5 minutes? But I'm there anyway. It's not that I'm coming there to see you.
Yeah.
So, there was a similar one when the Russian group left the meeting at Trump Tower. I was a few minutes behind them. Steve Bannon maybe said it, or Michael Wolff in Fire and Fury. Somebody said, and then they spoke with Ivanka. So I was intrigued by this because I didn't even see Ivanka. And what it turned out was, as they were getting in the elevator, she was coming out and went, hello. And they went, hello. Well, and people said to me, isn't that unusual? I said, no, what would have been unusual is if she'd said, sod off. That's unusual. It's not unusual to say hello when you're a well-brought-up person and you're on their territory. You're in her office space. So why is that unusual? But they made a big story about it, that she went, hello, and they went, hello. I mean, so I get it. I understand.
Moving on briefly to Macron and the French riots. He has not yet blinked. I suggested he might do. He said, I feel your anger, but he's not going to turn tail on the tax on oil, I don't think, yet. What do you think?
The doctor stop barking. I think it's a strange one. I mean, I was reading today that it was actually the protests are actually coming from both left and right of the political spectrum, because I mean, naturally, yes, with the way European politics is going, you kind of have the back of your mind maybe like Russia's involved in some way, stirring up trouble. Because I noticed also that, I don't know how you pronounce the website, Ruptl, RUPTL, which is one of the Russia TV sites or something. They're pretty much broadcasting the riots like live every day.
Well, Russian media, which is nearly all state-controlled now, absolutely has a pattern of this. I mean, this is a genuine, proper protest worthy of headlines. But Russian media seize on anything in any Western country and magnify it as if to say the whole place is falling apart. Now, the whole place is in a state of flux, yes, but I mean, they're doing it deliberately to play things up because they want to fracture Europe, because they don't want a united Europe.
Yeah, I think it's the thing I was mentioning earlier at the floor of democracy, in a sense, is we have debates, we have arguments, we have discussion, and Russia has somehow weaponized that and turned it into dissent and revolution, and you know, they, like you say, they blow it up in order to further create more instability.
This one is pretty serious, though, and I said to you last week, the French do have a long, fine tradition of revolting violently, or being violently revolting, whichever way round you want it, and they have absolutely gone for it in the last few days. And yeah, it does look, I was looking at some of the graffiti and some of the people, it does look like the extreme, hard, violent left sections of it are in there, and the extreme, violent far right are in there as well, and are absolutely making hay and burning cars.
And they're stirring it up. But what's worrying for me, I think, is the worrying aspect of the story, is this is about fuel. This is one of those stories which, unless somebody comes along with a particularly extremely good fuel cell in the future years, this is going to get only worse, because it's to do with resources.
Yeah, well, it has got worse because it's actually grown now more into anti-poverty and anti-Macron. The core of it is still the fuel. And I can understand people feeling bad. They were told a few years ago diesel's the way ahead, and most French vehicles run on diesel because it's less polluting. And then when suddenly the experts are wrong and diesel isn't less polluting, Mr. Macron raises the price by 25% on it. And they're thinking, we're paying the price for the elites' stupidity. And I'm not saying that means you can go and burn cars off the Champs-Elysees, but that is part of the background.
I've not even mentioned the word.
What word?
I don't think we're no further. I think it's looking like it's looking increasingly like she's not going to have a deal. I think the chance of the hard Brexiteers is fading rapidly, and I do. Well, we're not going to talk about it, but I will say I think the chances of a second referendum are looking more likely.
Okay, and I will say briefly that about 3 or 4 podcasts ago, I gave you the route through how it might be closer than people think, whilst covering my backside and saying I don't think that will happen. It isn't happening, and now it's a lot of the maths is if you lose by 200. You're going to have to resign. If you lose by 100, can you bluff it out? If you lose by 40, you're going to stay on. And so, we'll wait till next week. So, which brings me to possibly the most interesting of news stories this week. And I've even got a sound effect. Are you ready?
I simply must go.
Baby, it's cold outside.
The answer is
But
no.
baby, it's cold outside.
The welcome has
How
been
lucky that you dropped
so
in.
nice and warm.
Look out the window at that storm.
My sister will be. Sister.
Gosh, your lips look delicious.
My brother will be there.
I thought you were going to sing along to that for a second and then
Well, I will
expect me to
eventually.
join in.
Christmas classic. I'm already sick of it in the shops. A radio station in Cleveland, Ohio, has taken "Baby It's Cold Outside" off the playlist because it's had a few complaints. Why? It's manipulative and wrong. It's in the Me Too era. This guy's clearly trying to get this woman into bed by saying, "Oh, come on," and he's pressuring her. Bit of background. Actually, before a bit of background, let's just have a little bit more.
Tomorrow.
Think of my lifelong
At
sorrow.
least there will be plenty implied.
If you got pneumonia and
I
died,
really can't
get
stay.
over that old doubt, baby.
Ah, but it's cold
outside.
Anyway, that's the original version.
Insert sound of gunshot here. That's awful.
It's from the 1930s. Oh, no, sorry, I'm wrong. 1940s, written in 44. But it's been covered by Lady Gaga, Michael Bublé, Tom
good
Jones,
grief.
and Ceres Matthews. Will Ferrell has covered it in the movie Elf, along with Zooey Deschanel. So it's a back and forth conversation. And the guy's saying, "Oh, come on, you don't want to leave." And I've looked at the original film, and he is clearly trying to kiss her on a sofa while saying, "Oh, come on, have another drink." Basically, he is trying to get her to spend the night with him. And she's saying, "Nah, I've got to go." "Ah, but it's cold outside." So, given that you could argue he is being manipulative and he's pressuring her, does that mean the song should be pulled?
Well, let's strip away the naffness of the song. Ignore the fact it's a naff song. If this was a separate work of, let's call it a work of art. I mean, in a previous life, I used to teach the poetry of John Donne. John Donne used to do the same in poetry. What that songwriter there is doing in, that lyric. It was all about the seduction of women. It's all about, I mean, the stuff in John Donne's poetry, it does not sit well with a modern audience, as anybody would discover if ever tried sitting with a load of undergraduates getting their minds around it. They get very offended by this man's seduction techniques. That doesn't mean you shouldn't study the poems of John Donne, which are great poems. The same with
studying the poems and sticking it on a playlist on a radio, they're two different things.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's where I would say in my heart is actually, I think I agree with them taking it off, because if you're broadcasting it for entertainment purposes and people aren't choosing to listen to it knowing, like if you're going to go to a performance of Shakespeare, it's going to contain a lot of attitudes of the Elizabethan period. You're not doing that when you're listening to turning the radio on.
Yeah, and that is entertainment, but it's a different thing, isn't it? That is an artistic endeavour to tell truths. This is not that.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, it does push a little bit, because she does stay for a second drink at the end of the song, so you're getting a little bit of, well, yeah, no doesn't mean no, maybe it means yes, and that is.
Well, it's
problematic. Less problematic. There is a line in it, say, "What's in this drink?" which a lot of people naturally thought, "Oh, well, this is about drugs and date rape." Yeah. Apparently, I looked into it. In the 1930s, that line meant I'm telling the truth. Say, "What's in this drink?" I don't know why, but it does. But yeah, I started off before you, because you're cleverer than I am. Thinking, no, don't pull it. This is political correctness. And in fact, 86% of people polled in Cleveland, Ohio, want it on the playlist. But I'm thinking you have a point. And I was thinking of the Dam Busters film, in which there is a dog. It happens to be a black dog. And unfortunately, I'm not going to say it, but its name is the N-word. And I caught this film earlier this year. I was just flicking through some channels, and it was one of the old black and white film channels, and they hadn't taken it out, they hadn't bleeped it, and it was really quite shocking to hear it, even knowing that I'm viewing it through a contemporary lens. And I think that word is so offensive that there might be a case for bleeping it. But then let's move on to Hemingway's novels, in which a couple of them use the N-word, although that is a character and written at a time when it was used more. And on we go. It's perhaps each case you have to take in isolation. I'm not sure.
One thing is we already have these prohibitions for certain songs. I don't get to listen to the Sleaford Mods or Nick Cave on the radio because of the content. So it doesn't bother me. We make these selections anyway. So,
but we're not necessarily being po-faced.
No, I'm not being po-faced because I like Sleaford Mods and Nick Cave, but I also appreciate that it's not for all audiences. You know, we're increasingly in an age where you can pick and choose your media, and it's going to cause problems in the future. I've just had my favourite series called Daredevil cancelled by Netflix because of an argument with Disney, and because of the way that media is fracturing. We're all going to have our choices, and you know, you pick your stations, and you've got the freedom. That's what it's about, isn't it?
Can I give you my fact of the week before we go?
Please do.
The character in Scooby-Doo is called Scooby-Doo because when they were writing the characters for the cartoon series, somebody was singing Frank Sinatra's Strangers in the Night, in which he says, dooby-dooby-doo. And they just changed that. And that's why Scooby-Doo is called Scooby-Doo. Fact.
Brilliant. What an end! I bet no other podcast this week is going to end on that.
Exactly, and we're going to end on this because I can't resist it. So I'll say goodbye. If you could say goodbye as well.
Oh, goodbye.
And here we go. Goodbye.
Gosh, your lips look delicious.
My brother will be there at the door.
Waves upon a tropical shore.
My maiden aunt's mind is vicious.
Gosh, your lips are delicious.
Or maybe just a cigarette more.
Never such a blizzard before.
I've got to get
but
home.
But baby, you'd freeze out there.
Say, lend me a coat.
It's up to your knees out there.
You've really been grand.
I thrill when you touch my hand.
Don't you see?
How can you do this thing to me?
There's bound to be talk tomorrow.
Think of
The end is in sight.
The colourful phrase used by a charismatic figure.
This is the Trump shutdown.
Thank you, God bless you, and God bless the nations of the world.